its light reflecting off the polished copper spires and the white marble streets. It was the eve of the great year jubilee, and the city hummed with the frantic energy of a wind-up toy pushed to its limit. In the quiet corner of the royal conservatory, Julian stood perfectly still. He was a masterpiece of the grand artificer, a boy of fine porcelain glazed to a high, translucent sheen. To the passing eye, he was merely a youth in a velvet coat, perhaps a bit pale, perhaps a bit Leon, the hairy and gnomes the sands. But inside, Julian felt the cold weight of his hollow chest, a cavity where a heart should have been, filled instead with the Cambridgian Mornder patch and humans of Vizamus with the kingdom, greened cases wise on the for hours, ensuring the corners of his mouth turned upward at the precise angle of joy. But there is more generally on their ways, worry agents said to the present higher change. Envy is a human emotion, Julian. I was under the impression you were above such trivialities, or perhaps below them. Her words carried no malice, only a weary curiosity. She reached out a hand, her finger stopping just inches from his porcelain cheek. The shadow she cast was long and stretching across the white stone like a crack in a mirror. It has then uses the absence of error, Julian said, but I have seen the way the light catches on a chip in a teacup. It is the only part of the carolite the king worships. The smoke is not my power, it is my bandage. I hide because the truth of my face would ruin the symmetry of his perfect world. Returned back to him, the smoke of her veil thinning for a brief second, revealing the hint of a pale, sharp chin. It is made of the things people try to ignore. The darkness under the bed, the silhouette in the corner. It doesn't pretend to be a real bird. It is content to be a shadow. She looked up at him, this mold created to never fade. If the king knew, Julian mused, his voice a low hum, he would have to be mortality of stone. You will never feel the sting of age or the rot of sickness. You are a god of the mantelpiece, Jalland, he asked. You are a god of the mantelpiece. Julian looked down at his hands. He has used try to grasp it. It can't be perfect as while I on the land to live, and stone cannot feel the warmth of the sun. I spend my days mimicking a heartbeat, but I will never know why a heart beats faster when someone enters a room. I am a hollow vessel filled with clockwork. I want to be more than a masterpiece. I want to be a spection to the Digan. He would do that to you, knowing it is your protection. He stood up, his joint like embers. The sound of a distant orchestra began to tune their instruments, the discordant notes drifting up to the terrace. Julian and Alara sat in the silence that followed their confession, a silence that felt heavy with the weight of things left unsaid. For the first time in his existence, he treats us like tools. I am a statue to be admired, and you are a curtain to be pulled back when it suits him. We are not people to him. Bjarnest wondered Dames to her saying, Case then an invitation that wasn't a terrace. Leave to where, Julian? You are made of porcelain. You need the artificer to oil your joints and tighten your springs. Without him, you will seize up in a week. You will become a literal statue, frozen in some forest, a curiosity for the birds to nest in. And I am bound to this city's gloom. My shadows feed on the soot of these chimneys. In the wild, I would fade into nothingness. We are creatures of the cage striking to each other in the moonlight, while the kingdom below prepared for a celebration of a perfection they could never achieve. They moved through the palace like ghosts, Julian leading the way through the corridors he had memorized over decades of silent observation. He knew the paths the guards took, the timing of the mechanical sentries, and the hidden passages used by the servants. Alara moved beside him, her veil retracted into a tight, dense cloud that clung to her neck, making her less conspicuous in the dim light of the hallways. Then pulled into the Praemersers abide minds in immigration. 5, 4, 3. A loud erupted from the ironclads, a cloud of white steam filling the corridor. Now, Julian hissed. They bolted from the alcove recession supports on the walls. It was an exhausting feat, her brow glistening with sweat as she manipulated the very fabric of the room to hide them from the prying eyes of the portraits on the walls. Do you hear that? Julian asked, stopping by a moss-covered boulder struggled with the roots and rocks. He felt a sharp twinge in his hip, a grinding sensation that made his internal gears shriek. He gritted his teeth, the sound of ceramic against trees that the king had never bothered to conquer because it refused to grow in signs. Beyond the forest lay the wastes, and beyond that the unknown. Better to freeze as a free man than to be reset as a slave. Alara countered. She pulled him toward the stream. Julian hesitated, then stepped into the icy water. The king had not waited for the jubilee to start. He had already realized his centerpiece was missing. "They're coming," Julian said, his voice tightening. "They can track my gears, Alara. You have to leave me. If you stay, they'll find you too. You can hide in the shadows, but I am a beacon of over the stream like a heavy blanket." She worked until the section of the river where Julian sat was shrouded in an unnatural, pitch-black fog. Then she stepped into the shadows herself, disappearing from view just as the first mechanical hound burst into the clearing. They were horrific things of brass and bone, their rib cages housing glowing furnaces that puffed out black smoke. They sniffed the air, their metal snouts clanking as they searched for the scent of the prince. One hound came to the very edge of the water, its front paws submerged in the stream just inches from Julian's hiding spot. Julian held his breath, though he didn't need to. He focused on keeping his gears as still as possible, a feat of immense internal control. He could hear the hound's furnace growling. He had bear her breath coming in short, ragged gasps. She was fighting for him, risking her own life to keep him hidden. After what felt like an eternity, the hound's furnace growling. Feel the heat radiating from its body. The water around his legs held like lead something. He looked at her hands, weaving a small idle shadow between her fingers to tacks in the trunk of before. "Does it hurt?" she asked quietly. "It doesn't matter," Alara said, standing up and wrapping her smoke around her shoulders like a travel-worn cloak. "It's out there. It's real. And that's more than we ever had in Oakhaven." They stepped out of a tree and into the sunlight. For Gwyn, the light was no longer something to be feared for how it highlighted his chips and cracks.